Hello and welcome back to 5-Minute Theology, where I try and explain some concept from the Christian faith in 5 minutes or less. Today we're going to be talking about an incredibly influential idea in Christianity, which is the idea of the image of God, of humanity being made in the image of God. And I'll try and explain a little bit about what that implies and about how it's been influential in 5 minutes or less. Again, I will be using some slides to help with this, so if you're watching this on YouTube or on a similar video viewer, you might want to go full screen, and that should be a button usually at the bottom right of the picture. So take a moment to go full screen, and then we'll start the timer. Ready, steady, go. So, the image of God. It says in the very first chapter of the Bible, Genesis 1, God said, "Let us make man in our own image, in our likeness." Man there is humanity. And so it says that God made man in his own image. In the image of God he created them, male and female he created them. So what does it mean that he made human beings in his own image? Obviously it doesn't mean that God has 2 hands, 2 feet, 2 eyes. He is spiritual, does not have a physical body, not until he took one on as Jesus anyway. What it means, I think, is 2 main ideas, and the first is resemblance. A child will usually resemble their parent. A son will resemble their father, sometimes uncannily so. And we are to resemble God, our Creator. We're to resemble him in a lot of ways, in holiness, compassion, creativity, intelligence, orderliness, and so forth. And that is to shape the way that we work, act, and interact in his world. But because we resemble him, we are also able to act as his image in a different sense. Mesopotamian kings set statues like this throughout their lands to mark the edges of their domain, the edges of their rule. We do the same thing today. The realm of Queen Elizabeth II is full of her image because it's on all the coins. Where the image of the ruler is, their rule is. The image acts as a sort of marker of their rule. And part of the image of God that humans bear is to be markers and agents of God's rule, to be little kings or little representatives of the king spread throughout the earth, so that in us the whole earth is under God's rule because it's full of his representatives, his image. But to do that, of course, we have to be obeying his rule ourselves, and we have to be resembling him ourselves. And we all know that that's not always the case. The very third chapter of the Bible, so the chapter after that one, tells the story of how the image became damaged, how humans rejected God's rule and ceased to resemble him. And like when you photocopy a document that has a coffee stain on it, and the stain gets reproduced in all the photocopies, so this damaged image is the one that becomes reproduced and perpetuated throughout human history. The spoiled version of humanity, which is no longer under God's rule, no longer looking like him, becomes the default for the human race. How do you restore a damaged image? Well, in the photocopier example, you'd have to go back to your original image and get a new copy of it, one without the stain. And that's exactly what happens. Because in Jesus, God sends someone who is the perfect image of him, who is exactly like him, who is completely under his rule. And we are to be like Jesus, to imitate Jesus, and so to be like God. And as more people come to know Jesus and to follow him and be like him, so the earth becomes filled with the image of God as it becomes filled with people who are in the image of Christ. That's the story of the human race. There's a lot of implications to this doctrine, the image of God. One of them is that it was key in the development of modern science. We undertook scientific endeavours in the faith that the world would make sense to us, would be comprehensible to our brains. If you think about it, there's no reason to assume that that is so, unless you believe that we are made in the image of the one who made the universe. And if so, you'd expect the universe to make sense to us because we resemble the one who made it. It's a foundation for science, foundation for human rights. Human rights are built upon the belief that every human being matters and matters equally. There's no justification for believing that from nature, but there is from Christian faith, because all human beings are made in the image of God. All are representatives of the King. All are equally valuable. It's why there's no room for racism or sexism or prejudice, not so much because those are specific wrong things, but because all of those equally deny the image of God. All of those deny the fact that all human beings are equally valuable, and their value is found not in race or gender, but the image of God. And that's why we build a democratic political system in which every human being has an equal vote, because every human being is equally valuable, because they all share in the image of God. There we are. 5 minutes theology on the image of God. There's a lot more I could say, but I hope that was an interesting start and start some conversations. Come back next week and we'll talk some more about 5-minute theology.